Testing, testing. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can please take your seats. We are about to begin. If you're in the lobby, if you can go ahead and come inside. We're going to close the doors. If everyone can please take your seats, we are about to begin. If we can close the doors, everyone take your seats. Thank you. Once again, if everyone can please come in from the lobby and take your seats. If everyone could please grab your seats. You're welcome to bring your coffee in with you, but if you can please grab your seats. Now, I don't want to do the education thing. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. Wonderful. We can go ahead and close the doors. We are about to get started. Just so you know, if you can silence your phones, we will be broadcasting this live and we will be on CNN. If you can please silence your phones. Take your seats if you haven't used the restroom yet. C-SPAN, excuse me, we're on C-SPAN. C-SPAN. Yes, that's that too. Please take your seats. We will be recording. So again, if you haven't used the restroom yet, please do that and take your seats. We're about to begin. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see all of you. I am Rhonda Spears-Bell, the Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at the National Urban League, and it is my great privilege to welcome all of you to the 2024 Empowerment Summit and the release of this year's State of Black America report. Before we begin our program, I would like to open with a short prayer. Will you bow your heads? Father, we thank you for this day. And as we gather together, God, we humbly seek your presence. Grant us clarity of mind and vision that we may see beyond challenges and seek solutions to empower, to uplift, and to root out injustice everywhere. Bless us with insight and inspiration to continue the work ahead. We offer thanks for the opportunities before us and trust in your divine guidance. And it's in your name we pray. And let everyone say amen. 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 Doesn't that feel good? Amen. So welcome again to our opening plenary of the State of Black America, which we have entitled Essential and Endangered, a call to action to protect and expand the Civil Rights Act. And if that language evokes a sense of urgency, the meaning is 100% intentional. See, the 1964 Civil Rights Act is perhaps the most impactful and significant U.S. legislation to become law in the 20th century. For 60 years, the law and its protections have advanced the cause of equality and have served as a protection against discrimination. But in 2024, the Civil Rights Act is under imminent threat by extremists in federal and state legislatures and among our judiciary. The Urban League movement has come to Washington, D.C. to declare this day in no uncertain terms, not on our watch. Not on our watch. Now, in a few moments, our president and CEO, Mark Moria, will present the Urban League State of Black America report, and we'll talk specifically about our new campaign to protect and expand the Civil Rights Act and American democracy itself. But first, I want to thank all of the Urban Leaguers from around the country who are joining us here in DC, and those of you who are joining us via live stream. Give yourselves a round of applause. That's a little weak. I said give yourselves a round of applause. You came from far and near to be with us, and we are so grateful for it. Your passion and engagement has never been more important. I also want to thank our friends and justice partners in Congress. We appreciate your commitment to preserving the integrity of the Civil Rights Act and broadening its protections. We look forward to collaborating with you to set America's focus back towards equality and democracy. But to start things off, I'd like to invite George Lambert, the president and CEO of the Greater Washington Urban League and our host affiliate CEO, to come at this time to bring remarks. Put your hands together for our friend and colleague.
I am sporting the cane this morning, a little bit of surgery, and I figured if I have to use the cane, why not style it, right?
That's right.
Okay. All right, so welcome, Urban Leaguers. I'm really delighted to be here. I want to be opening up by sending you a welcome to the Greater Washington Urban League, to Washington, D.C., and quite frankly, my city of birth. It's always been an honor for me to serve the Urban League movement in my city of birth. I will start by saying to you that the Greater Washington Urban League, we've been here since 1938. And we responded in 1938 to a clarion call, if you will, to certainly support and assist the African community in terms of navigating the slippery slopes of trying to access federal government jobs. Imagine that. Federal government jobs. Now, fast forward, this is 2024. You know, we've done a lot more since then. We're still in the workforce development space, but we've certainly done a lot more since then as well. So, one of the things I do want to share with you today is the fact that last year, the Greater Washington Urban League, we served more than 12,000 clients, direct service, not indirect, because that number would be much larger. 12,000 direct clients. Yes, please applaud. I do want to share with you, I did have an opportunity to take a peek, Mark, at the State of Black America. And guess what? We're still fighting for the struggle of equality. We're still fighting the struggle of equality. But what I really came to say to you this morning in my welcome to you is that now is not the time to despair over the enormity of the burden, okay? Now is the time for us to get back in the trenches and stay in the trenches, okay? And Mark, here it is for you, and Rhonda, here it is for you as well. It's time for us to get back to defend democracy, okay? To certainly defend diversity as well, and to defeat poverty, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, that is our North Star, okay? That is our mission. Consider yourself welcome to Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Let's give our friend George Lambert another round of applause. Thank you so much. I would like to acknowledge our State of Black America launch event presenting sponsor, Venture Global. And now I would also like to invite our Legislative Policy Conference presenting sponsor to the podium. Please welcome from Johnson & Johnson, the Head of Government Affairs for North America, Courtney Billington.
Good morning, and thank you, Rhonda. It's a pleasure and privilege to see all of you again this year. I had the good fortune of being here last year for the National Urban League's annual policy conference. And there's so much more work to do, and I reflect on Rhonda's words as well as George's about what we need to do as we think about this year's conference. We are here as part of Johnson & Johnson to partner with you and recognize the great work that you do as National Urban League. We're working together to make sure that we are fighting the good fight. We're working to make sure that we're advancing social justice and inspiring all of us to go beyond what we feel is possible. You know, and I think about the annual Legislative Policy Conference as it being like the Super Bowl. You know, you bring together the champions of all of the affiliates as you're preparing to think about the policy change that needs to happen. And how many of you saw the halftime ceremony of this year's Super Bowl? Yeah. Usher did a great job, didn't he? You know, I think about Usher when he was doing that halftime show, and I was thinking about Mark Morial. Now, why was I thinking about Mark when Usher was doing that halftime show? I had the privilege back in November to go to Mark's 20th anniversary event, and at halftime, Mark was out on the dance floor doing some moves, which I know Usher stole from Mark. So Mark, thank you for your tremendous leadership of the National Urban League. I'm delighted to be here representing Johnson & Johnson as a longtime partner with the Urban League. Our relationship has endured over about a 60-year span. And we're so grateful for the leadership of all of you, the leadership of many who have gone before us. And I think about many of the leaders within Johnson & Johnson who are many of our Black trailblazers, many of whom emerged from the National Urban League in seats like yours. Nancy Lane was Johnson & Johnson's first female vice president, and Nancy happened to be Black, which was a great thing in our history, in our company. Harold Sims, who was a former executive director, he was the first Black corporate affairs vice president in Johnson & Johnson. Alice Holden, a Black senior operations materials manager and buyer within our company, and when I started with Johnson & Johnson, that is the role that I filled. So when I think about those who have gone before us and have done the hard work, I continue to redouble my efforts to make sure that I'm doing the hard work. And so as we approach this 60th anniversary of the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, later in July, it is so important for all of us to celebrate the progress that has been made, while we also take on the responsibility to do the work that remains ahead of us. This landmark legislation was achieved through decades of courageous activism, leadership, and it made a crucial step forward for us in the fight for racial equality. Now, unfortunately, all of us know that racism continues to threaten the lives of Black Americans today. And in healthcare, in the space where I'm at, and I work each and every day, it also fuels an insidious set of health disparities that are undermining the physical and psychological well-being of Black Americans at every age. Last year, the Associated Press found that from birth to death, Black Americans fare worse in many measures of health compared to their white counterparts. For many of us in this room, sadly, this finding was not a surprise. Given the significant body of research that shows Black Americans have lower life expectancies and a higher prevalence of serious health conditions like hypertension, diabetes, dementia, stroke, and cancer than white Americans. These jarring statistics underscore just how much systemic racism threatens the Black community and our health. And while we can't undo hundreds of years of bias and discrimination overnight, we can and we must make strides towards progress with bold action, education, and collaboration to drive policy change. At Johnson & Johnson, we're on a mission to create a healthier and more equitable world. We're working very close to close the racial health gap with care models, solutions, and social impact initiatives that address the lack of access to high-quality care, health information, and resources in our Black communities. In addition to that, we're embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion into our company and its culture at a time when many people don't want to use the words diversity, equity, and inclusion. We believe that the efforts of National Urban League and the ability for us to partner as a company with them and all of you is a critical capability that we need to make a healthier future for all. The journalist and civil rights leader Ida B. Wells once said, "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them." As you work together this week, together with policymakers here on the Hill, I continue to urge you to turn up the light that the National Urban League does better than no other organization. Thank you for all that you do, and have a wonderful conference.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Give him another round of applause. We appreciate your partnership. The National Urban League appreciates all of our corporate partners for their continued support for our mission. And the mission continues. Now, are you ready? Yes. It's time to take a deep dive into the 2024 State of Black America. And here to present it is none other than our fearless leader, the National Urban League's President and CEO. Let's give a round of applause for Mark H. Morial.
Ron, appreciate it. Good, thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to take a quick seat. Is that okay? Yes, I am still working through trying to compete in the NBA dunk contest. Yeah, next year. I'll be off IR. First of all, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Let's thank Rhonda Spears Bell. Rhonda Spears Bell, and my longtime partner and colleague in working at the City of New Orleans, a U.S. Conference of Mayors, and now at the National Urban League. Rhonda Spears Bell is now an ordained elder, and she always called her evangelist. And now, so let's give it up for Rhonda Spears Bell. And a warm thanks for Courtney Billington and Johnson & Johnson. I used their products this morning. But most importantly, Courtney, I really appreciated you making the connection between many of those early executives and the National Urban League, which sort of not only reaffirms our partnership, but it reaffirms the role that NUL played in opening doors to corporate America a long time ago, before it was called diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'll get to that a little later. Secondly, I want to welcome, raise your hands, Urban League affiliate leaders from across the country. Give a wave, give a wave, give a wave, and a hand. For those in the audience and those who are watching, this is the heart and the soul of our work. Men and women, highly talented, highly committed on the ground in 92 communities across the nation. Collectively, they're touching 3 million people a year with direct services. So give it up for our affiliate leaders. Thank you all, colleagues. And also, they are supported by a number of volunteer groups, affiliate board members. Each affiliate has its own board. Any affiliate board members here in the room, please raise your hand. We want to acknowledge you. We want to thank you so much for being here and for your work as volunteers. And then there is the historic National Urban League Guild. All the way back in 1942, a woman of passion and style by the name of Molly Moon had a vision. And in those days, even though we had women executives in the 20s, women were not afforded a full role in the executive work of the Urban League movement. Molly Moon said, we will serve as volunteers, and built the Guild as a volunteer corps of chapters across the nation. Guilders, raise your hand. I know several of you are here. Bobby Scott, our president, thank you all very, very much. And then guess what? It's the 25th anniversary of the National Urban League Young Professionals. 25 years. We're 25 years young as the Young Professionals, but where's Shalondon? Stand up, Shalondon. We want to salute. You got to stand up. We're saluting all of our young professionals, and we're going to have a deep dive celebration in New Orleans at our annual conference. We appreciate what they've brought, multiples of thousands, volunteer work, advocacy, participation in LPC. The young professionals have made a huge difference in the Urban League movement, and I want to thank you all, and we're just starting because we're going to continue to grow. And then with us this morning, here in the building, maybe some in the room, we have a number of students who are part of our BEAT program, our Business Executive Exchange program. Any of the students here, or are they otherwise engaged in another? We have one or two students here. And let me make sure I get the schools. We have schools mainly from the DMV who are with us today, and they're here from Howard, Bowie State, Delaware State, and Morgan State. Give it up for those great universities which are making a difference in the lives of our people. And I want to salute them and thank them, and I'll be spending some time with them a little bit later, indeed, this morning. It's an honor, always an honor, to be able to present the state of Black America. And it is always important for people to know what emanated. Where did this notion of a report, the state of Black America, come from? And it was 1976. Now, we anticipate in a few days the president will give the State of the Union address. Very important time when we hear from the President of the United States on his blueprint, vision, and execution for the nation. Well, in 1976, when the late, great legend Vernon Jordan held this position, and a person on whose shoulders I stand, sat down and watched President Ford deliver the early 1976 State of the Union address. He listened intently and carefully to President Ford. President Ford's address, for the most part, painted a picture of America where there were no black people, a picture of America where there were no poor people, a picture of America that, for the most part, ignored the trials and travails of locked out and left out communities. No mention of poverty, no mention of civil rights, no mention of cities, no mention of urban America whatsoever, no mention of the raging recession that was taking place in the middle 1970s that were battering. President Ford painted a false, because it was incomplete. When things are incomplete, they're false. Picture of the nation. So Vernon Jordan, in his own inimitable way, sat down and said, I'm going to, in effect, prepare my own blank report. You know, George, you know, there's always a choice adjective when our great leader talked, right? And he pulled together a group of scholars, African-American scholars and others, to, in effect, print what was a mimeographed report with both analysis, diagnosis, and recommendations on the future of the nation. And that was the beginning of the state of Black America. And so today it is an honor to be able to now, for almost 50 years later, for me to be able to present to you our thinking on what is the state of Black America. Succinctly put, the state of Black America is not on our watch. Not on our watch will we allow the progress and the gains and the very essence of the work that's been done by many generations of Americans, many generations of civil rights leaders and Black Americans, to be eroded by a pernicious, divisive, negative, hateful effort, which is designed to erase the last 70 years in American history. So stay with me. The state of Black America is strong because we are strong. The state of Black America is proud because we are proud. The state of Black America is resilient because we can take bumps and bruises and slips and stumbles and falls and put downs and keep on working. And the state of Black America is not just a comment on the state of Black America. It is a comment on the state of the nation, on the state of the union. The challenges that we face are not always challenges that we only face. They're faced broadly in other communities. Many times those challenges are disproportionate to our community. So we can't allow anyone to hijack our voice. When we speak about the state of Black America, we are speaking about the state of the nation. The nation. Say the nation. The nation. So this year's report has three components to it. And if you will, let me sort of walk through these three, because I think it's important to understand what we did this year. So understanding that this represents the 60th anniversary since the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It is important for us to understand that when we talk about all of these issues, we're standing on this foundation of an American Magna Carta. An American Magna Carta which was passed in 1964 after a long fight and a long struggle that went all the way back to the Civil War. After the Civil War, when the nation amended its Constitution and created a 14th Amendment, they added a section in there that said that Congress shall enforce this amendment by appropriate legislation. This was in the late 1860s. Now, what happened along that journey is instructive to today. The first Civil Rights Act that was passed, the Civil Rights Act of 1866, was twice vetoed by then President Johnson. It became law because the Congress overrode his veto. The second Civil Rights Act that was passed was in 1875. That act, interestingly, looks a lot like the 1964 Act. We got to teach a little bit this morning. And that 1875 Civil Rights Act in 1883 was substantially struck down by the United States Supreme Court. And the United States Supreme Court's character, meaning who sat on the court, changed as a result of the 1876 election, the Hayes-Tilden Compromise. So here was the Supreme Court, less than 20 years after the Civil War, declaring a piece of legislation designed to enforce the Constitution as unconstitutional. From that point forward, 1883, this very same court, in another, if you will, judicial coup, a coup in 1896, declared separate but equal the law of the land and banished black people to a second-class status for some 70 years. I am connecting dots because as things go, things repeat themselves. And we need to understand that while those who are battling our progress, they're following a historic roadmap as well. That's right. And we must understand that historic roadmap. So from 1896 all the way until 1964, the civil rights leaders, the civil rights advocates of the early 20th century began to think and imagine and work on how they could pass a new civil rights law. And this Plessy v. Ferguson decision gave rise to the creation in 1909 of the NAACP, gave rise to the creation in 1910 of the National Urban League and many other organizations that evolved thereafter. I want to bring us to 1964 because 1964 and the passage of the Civil Rights Act did not happen because there was a fit of enlightenment by the members of the United States Congress. It did not happen because of serendipitous osmosis. It happened because there was a movement beginning when that courageous woman refused to give up her seat in Montgomery, Alabama, of direct action. That's right. And that movement was supported by an aggressive strategy in the courts that Thurgood Marshall and others, Charles Hamilton Houston, architected to try to knock down all these walls. So it was litigation and activism. Siobhan and Melanie, our predecessors in the Big Six, stood in 1963 with 250,000 Americans at that great march on Washington. They had a demand. We want a Civil Rights Act and a Voting Rights Act, and we want it now. So we come forward. And I've been asked on a number of news shows, what's happened and has the Civil Rights Act of 1964 worked? And I look at the correspondence, both women and African Americans and other people of color who now grace the anchor desk at all of these great media organizations and said, you would not be here. Not just the African Americans, but the women and the Latinos and Asians and others, you would not be here but for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So while cynics and sometimes what I call polite prevaricators will sometimes say nothing has changed, I say, were you living in 1964? If we suggest that nothing has changed, we are disrespecting the work of many. And it took, yes, a Martin Luther King and a Dorothy Height and a Whitney Young, and it took a Malcolm X, and it took a Rosa Parks and a Thurgood Marshall, and it took a Jack Greenberg, and it took the UAW supporting the March on Washington, and it took a Lyndon Baines Johnson, who knew how to break a 17-year filibuster. We don't know how many road projects he promised. We don't know how many deals he cut. But whatever he did, it worked. And the Civil Rights Act of '64 passed. We are progenitors of that work. The second part of this State of Black America is the Equality Index. And each and every year for the past 20 years, we have said, let's put the facts when it comes to the numbers of social and economic conditions out there so we can understand clearly what the comparative is when it comes to the social and economic conditions of Black Americans and white Americans, so that we're not having a discussion with our brilliant opinions only, and we have brilliant opinions, and we're also not having a discussion with the rank misinformation and lying that goes on when it comes to progress or lack thereof in this nation. And the third part of this report is a report on President Biden and whether he has lived up to the promises he made in writing on paper as candidate Biden. And we wanted to look at it so that people could understand, because several of you in here are elected, some of you like me are former elected. What counts is that politics sometimes like romance. I make a promise, you buy into it, did I keep it? It's not about, well, I'm changing my promises every day or backing off 3 and coming up with 2 more new ones. So we decided we wanted to look at that, and we had evaluated President Obama. We need to, in the world of great rhetoric, right, this world of great rhetoric, we need to always have a factual basis. And what the National Urban League seeks to do is provide a factual basis, whether it's the Equality Index or now the Biden Progress Report. We put it out there for people to debate it. You can discuss it. You can challenge it if need be, but we are just presenting the facts. So those are the 3 components of the State of Black America report. Can we talk a little bit about the Civil Rights Act of '64? So let's talk a little bit about what the Civil Rights Act of '64, which had 7 provisions in it, 7 sections in it, which sought to open the doors to both employment and public accommodations. There were provisions on voting and a provision that applied to anyone that took federal money. So that act, let's look at some of the changes, top line changes, and I've referenced these in American Life. What has happened in corporate America since 1964? So since '64, in '64 there was 0 black and 0 women. We now have 8 African American and 50 plus women. And I am not going to suggest to you that we can be satisfied or should be satisfied with this number. But it is important to point out the change. And these dynamic women and African Americans who lead these companies are competent and qualified and outstanding. And behind them, there are legions of vice presidents and senior vice presidents. Don't get me wrong. The fact that we highlight this does not suggest satisfaction. That's not what it suggests. It suggests that this act has made a bit of a difference in this area. Let's look at the political community, right? The Congress of the United States. And I think this was enhanced by the 64 Act and the 65 Voting Rights Act. But look, 5 blacks. When the Civil Rights Act passed, there were 5 blacks, which included Adam Clayton Powell of New York, Bill Dawson of Los Angeles, along with Bob Nix of Philadelphia, and Charles Diggs of Detroit, and John Conyers of Detroit. Those were the 6 African Americans who were a member of the Congress at that time. Now there are 60 African Americans, 18 Asian Americans, 54 Latinos, 5 Native Americans, 150 women. Applause. That deserves an applause. And I wanted to point this out because, once again, has there been progress, and far more progress here than on the corporate side, because this owes to the power of the vote. This owes to political engagement. This owes to involvement. And then beyond these, there are a large number of members of Congress who are not black, not Asian American, not Latino, not Native American, who African American and Latino voters are essential to their coalition, meaning they could not win if they couldn't put a coalition that included our communities together. So let's give that a big round of applause. And I am always excited when we look at that. So the Civil Rights Act has made a difference, but the current challenges that we face, I want to put this in this context. May of 2020, COVID was 2 months old. We were all watching television, and then the iPhone video that the young woman in Minneapolis took was flashed across our screens. And we saw George Floyd we saw a man die before our eyes. Inhumanity and brutality. Which one's working? This one? Neither? Let me talk loud. So we saw that on the streets. Spontaneously across the nation. Spontaneously, there were protests across the world. I remember we got press calls from New Zealand and Hungary and the United Kingdom. And there was a rise and an awakening and a reckoning. Tell you a story. I know my time is tight, but I got to tell you a personal story because it did happen. I got a letter. Tina said, "There's a letter you've received. I think you need to look at this letter." So I opened this letter. It's a handwritten letter from someone I went to middle school with. And, I attended a middle school where I was the first African-American student to attend there. And at the time I was there were only 2 African American students in the whole school, and I was the only one in my class for 4 straight years. It was an apology letter from someone who had been an upperclassman, probably in 7th or 8th grade when I was in 5th grade, apologized for bullying, calling me names. I guess they call it microaggressions or macroaggression. But he said in the letter that he was compelled to write the letter because of what happened to George Floyd, and that it had forced him to, quote, re-examine who he is and what he's about. No return address. But I found him. I only make reference so we understand how powerful the moment was with people, corporations, foundations, and government making commitments, strong commitments. Fast forward to today. Fast forward to today. Not on our watch will we be silent while we watch those who made commitments all of a sudden gain the courage of the Lion of Wizard of Oz and walk away. Not on our watch will we be silent while people run for office or wealthy hedge fund people call competent black women who are presidents of major universities DE&I hires. You might as well said what you really meant. You can say what you want, but don't say that. This is the moment that we find ourselves in. We find ourselves in a moment where over 1,000 proposals since 2020, Ron Daniels, 1,000 to suppress the vote, to make it harder for people to vote, targeted at black people and Latinos and poor people and disabled Americans and older Americans and students, with a cover story which is a blatant misrepresentation and lie that somehow the election system is riddled with fraud. We have to be clear that these arguments today are also going to involve cover stories of misrepresentation, prevarication, misstatement of facts, invention of facts, distraction from the truth, and diminution of history. 1,000 bills across the nation to ban books. Toni Morrison, come on. Maya Angelou, come on. Ralph Ellison, get out of here. To ban books, as though these students are not going to go to Barnes and Nobles and pick them up. Or they're not going to go online and say, boy, they want to ban them. I want to read them just that much more. The absurdity of it all is that from 2020, there's now a pushback, reaction. But while half the states have engaged in proposals to suppress the vote, I'm happy to tell you that another half of the states have passed legislation to expand access to voting, that have introduced mail voting, that have done things to make it easier. So this is not simply that there's one side of this ledger and not another side of the ledger. For every company that may be retreating on diversity, equity, and inclusion, there may be 3 more or 4 who's saying, I'm going to double down, and I'm going to stand, and I'm going to remain committed. We have to understand and not get caught in the glass half empty mentality. We cannot fight a battle if we do not have a mindset that we are strong because our case is right, and that our friends and our allies and ourselves are aligned to make this occur. So in this index, very quickly, we index at about 76% of where white Americans are. And I encourage you to look at the index. So the index is an average. Here's the thing. You see an improvement in the last 2 years. That improvement is probably the largest 2-year improvement we've seen in the past. However, at this pace, parity is 180 years away. Now keep this in perspective. We are like a caboose on a train. So over the last 50 years, has the high school graduation rate in the black community gone up? Yes, it has. Give a hand. Give a hand. But the rate for white Americans has improved too. And that's not a bad thing, but we remain behind. Ditto for the college matriculation rate. And for many, many areas, we've made progress, but we've not made relative progress to the overall improvements in the country. And that's the paradox of this index. I wanted to show you these 5 areas so you can see that when it comes to economics, we lag. When it comes to social justice, which includes the criminal justice system, we lag. These are areas that have been stubborn and persistent, and I would argue they are connected in many respects. So what we need to do is understand these numbers and use this as a tool for conversations and policy making and thought leadership. We want students, we want scholars, we want journalists, we want business people, labor leaders, faith leaders, politicians to know these numbers and understand these numbers. And then finally, Joe Biden. So Joe Biden, when we as a civil rights community, Melanie, you'll remember when we got on the phone in 2020 to speak to him, and it's our practice to try to speak to anybody running, but we're not going to chase you. If we send you a letter and you don't return it, that's on you. Come on now. So let's just understand. We'll talk to anybody, anywhere, who wants to be serious about our community, and I'm not talking about tennis shoes. I'm talking about jobs. I'm talking about health. I'm talking about our children and education and the like. So very importantly, when we talked to Joe Biden as a candidate, we challenged him. You need to put a plan together for Black America. You put a plan together. We want to see a set of specifically enumerated issues. He said, that's a great idea. I'll do it, but I'd like to see what you recommend. So we all sent our recommendations to his team, and they worked through it, and they produced a plan. Did the plan have every detailed specificity that we wanted? No. Did it substantially embrace many of our main ideas? Yes. So we looked at what the president has done as president. And the truth of the matter is that he has fulfilled a large number of his stated commitments. 2 things I want everyone to know, because there's a lot of misinformation floating around. Right now, if you look at 2020, both the overall unemployment rate and the Black unemployment rate, you see significant declines, all the way down to 5.3% for Black Americans, 3.7% on an overall basis. And that is important because we were in a trough in 2020 with millions and millions of people out of work, with 40% of black businesses having closed down. 17% of all businesses had been shut down. This is what we faced. But we also thought it was important to look at the things that did not necessarily get done in the first 3 years. And before saying that, let's celebrate. This president said, I will nominate a black person, a black woman, to be vice president. That's right. And let me tell you, I've heard promises from politicians for a long time. And then I hear what I call the old crawfish move. You know the crawfish move? Start backing up. Backing up. Well, you know, circumstances have changed, and you know, I got some other pressures on me, and I don't think I can follow the promise, and can I make it up to you later? We didn't see that when it came to the nomination of Kamala Harris. And then he said, I'll put a black woman on the United States Supreme Court. And not only did he nominate a black woman, he nominated an outstanding lawyer, legal scholar, who can hold her own and isn't afraid to open her mouth or use her pen. That's right. These were important commitments, and we put the general there who's now head of the Joint Chiefs. So we asked for a diverse cabinet and a diverse staff and people who look like our community. The healthcare expansion is notable, and if you look at the index, the healthcare disparities have narrowed a bit. And that doesn't mean the healthcare system is perfect. Look, I've been in it with this knee. Don't get me started. I'm not talking about any insurance companies, but I love my doctor. So it's important, again, to look at this and other areas of improvement. But then we said, there's an unfinished agenda. There are things that we know didn't get done, and I want to list a few of them there. There are 3 there, but I want to highlight 4. So, voting rights, the freedom to vote, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, did not get done. This is essential. What happened? Let me tell you what really happened. You want to know what really happened? So, Melanie, we were in the trenches on this. I think, Siobhan, it's right before you joined the coalition, but we were working with the executive branch and members of Congress on the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And we had gotten it through the House, right? Got it through the House. And then all of a sudden we're in the Senate. And we had 48 commitments. 48 commitments. We had 48 hard commitments. All we needed was for 2 members of the United States Senate to agree to create an exception one time for the filibuster. And we worked on those 2 members. You know their names. One's from West Virginia. He's retiring. The other one's from Arizona. She's running, I think, for re-election. And we talked to them, and we worked very hard to persuade them to grant this exception. Let's be candid. Let's be clear. Let's be unvarnished. Let's not mince words. It didn't happen because of the 2 of them. They blocked the passage of the John Lewis bill. Now, the Republican blockade was there. We knew it was there. We knew we couldn't move him. Mitch McConnell told his caucus, under no circumstances will we ever support voting rights. Says that privately, publicly may say something else. This is why this did not happen. We passed the George Floyd bill twice in the House of Representatives. Good, strong bill. Didn't do everything we wanted it to do, but we passed it. Same thing. Got to the Senate, died right there on the vine, right? The Freedom to Vote Act with the John Lewis bill, same exact thing. The fourth one I would add was the Commission on Reparations, which could never get the support in the House of Representatives to be adopted. There's unfinished business. Unfinished business on our agenda. Every one of these items I've discussed, when explained to the American people, generates 60 to 70% support. When they understand it beyond talking points, when they understand it beyond divisive rhetoric, when you tell them specifically what they do, they have almost universal support. So we cannot allow ourselves to be mesmerized into a mindset that what we want is something only we want. There's a broad coalition of people who will support. But if we do not raise our voices and say this is a priority, if we do not challenge those that come to our community and want our vote, if we do not use our platforms and our leadership to tell our community why this is important and why these things are on the ballot in 2024, shame on us. This is the work that we have to do. So let me close because our call to action is clear. And our call to action is also what I would recommend that President Biden, when he gives his State of the Union address, include. Number one, defend democracy. Say defend democracy. Defend democracy. Number two, we want to demand diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what does that mean? We demand a fair chance. We demand equal access to the American dream. We demand equal economic opportunity. We demand that the words of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 be real. That what's on paper is what we live by. That is what diversity, equity, and inclusion. Don't get confused when people want to get in terminological gymnastics. Used to call it fair employment practices. Then they said it was EEO. Then it was affirmative action. Now it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And some people want to call it belonging. And part of me says, call it what you want. Just make sure it's real. Make sure it's real in terms of creating opportunity for the communities that were locked out and left out before 1964. So we must demand diversity, equity, and inclusion in factories, in boardrooms, in classrooms, everywhere in America. And then finally, we must defeat poverty. The 21st century has given us the largest economy in the history of human beings here in the United States of America. Almost 25 trillion in GDP, and you can't even tell me, because I can't even remember how many zeros that is. But it's big. 25 trillion. Yet, here's the truth. The truth is you have what I call traditional poverty, extreme poverty. People who are on the edge of simply trying to keep their head above water. And then you have those, and this is a large portion, who get up and go to work every day. They might have 2 jobs. They're raising children or taking care of seniors and other family members. They can't pay their rent. There's not enough money to make the mortgage work, pay for food, transportation. We have a new working poverty in America, which is pernicious. And this is part of the wealth gap. and part of the income gap. We need a renewed effort. Bring back the child tax credit. It made a difference. Pass a national living wage bill and index it to inflation. Give us a comprehensive plan on home ownership to make housing more affordable and to build more affordable units. Give us a way to make college more affordable. And don't preach to me about everybody doesn't need to go to college, because if they don't, they should decide, not you. We don't want tracking and steering. In the days of segregation, high schools in the black community in the South taught manual arts, homemaking, not college prep. They were not designed. Well, I believe in workforce and certificates and community colleges and job opportunities for those without college. But I don't want any young person who has a vision and a dream to be college educated to not take that path because money is in the way. I don't want dreams and aspirations to be suppressed because someone else said you don't need a college education. So we have to stand up for a system of human capital preparation, be it certificates or community colleges or quality high schools or apprenticeship programs or workforce development programs, and college and graduate school that's attainable and affordable for everyone. America became the economic powerhouse in the 17th and 18th centuries because of the system of slavery and free labor. Post-World War II, it became an economic powerhouse, I would contend, because of a combination of things. Yes, the GI Bill, which left many of us out, but civil rights. Civil rights opened the doors. You go look at the economy of 63, and you look at 64, and you look at the economy of 2024. You go look at Houston, you go look at Dallas, you go look at Atlanta before civil rights and after civil rights. You get my point. The 64 Act, the transformation of America towards a multiracial democracy, is good for us, but it's good for all. So I'm going to just close by reminding you of two things. So this year, I want everyone to embrace this D3 message. Take it back to your local communities. When people say, what is the agenda? We want to defend democracy. We want to demand diversity. We want to defeat poverty. We want policies. We want initiatives. We want programs. We want recommendations. We want to focus on doing that. And then we're going out with our civic engagement campaign this fall. We have to register people. We have to educate people. And we have to mobilize people. We have to register them and educate them and mobilize them. And let me say this, not voting is not a strategy.
That's right.
I hear people saying, well, I'm going to withhold my vote. And I'm like, and what strategy is that? And what book are you reading? Or do you have a comprehensive strategic plan as to how not voting is not a strategy. Not voting is unilateral disarmament. Not voting is not going to a knife fight with a water pistol. It's going to a knife fight with your hands tied behind your back. And they're tied behind your back because you tied them, not someone else. We have to be clear-eyed, and we have to understand that voting for candidates is not like American Idol. I'm not going to sit there and say, who entertained me, made me feel good. I love their charisma. They have funny jokes. Voting is about comparing people's agendas, their commitments, their promises, their seriousness about what they're going to do. And we have to educate our community that this is about our power and we can't give it up. But we have to also understand voting alone is not a magical wand. That I just vote for somebody and go sit back and they'll... No, it's part of being civically engaged. We have to do more than vote. We have to be organized. We have to be engaged. We have to be part of the policy conversations. We have to be involved at the local levels. Urban Leaguers, you know that. Our job is to stimulate, encourage, and motivate our communities to do the same. So our Reclaim Your Vote campaign, stay tuned for more details about the work that we will be doing. And we are going to be out there. We said this time, 2020, we had to do a lot of stuff online. 2022, we did a lot of stuff online. We're going to continue to work online. But it's time for us to roll up our sleeves and knock on some doors, roll up some sleeves and get on the college campuses, roll up our sleeves and go to the neighborhoods, the barbershops, the beauty salons, the churches, the hangouts, and have conversations with people about the importance of participation and civic engagement. Can I count on you? Yes. Are you ready? Yes. Not on our watch. Not on our watch. Not on our watch. For those that may be viewing, we'd like to thank you for tuning in. stateofblackamerica.org is where the full and complete report is available. It's free. Download it. Please share it. Please share it. Please spread it generously and abundantly through your networks and throughout your community. Good morning. God bless you, and thank you.
Let's give it up again for President Morial. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the diagnosis. Now it's time for the prescription. The National Urban League is committed to defending the integrity and intent of the Civil Rights Act while expanding its protections to all vulnerable Americans. And at this critical moment for our democracy, our institutions need to advance equality instead of turning the clock backward. And to discuss this call to action, we've invited an outstanding panel of influential thought leaders and social justice activists, and let's meet them right now. Starting with the President and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and convener of the Black Women's Roundtable. Give it up for Melanie Campbell, our friend and our sister. Now let's welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Council of Negro Women, Dr. Siobhan Arline Bradley. Welcome to the stage, the President and CEO of the Columbia Urban League, J.T. McGlawhorn. Now let's welcome back to moderate this amazing panel and discussion, President and CEO Mark Morial.
Hey, thank you all very much. And we're going to get to the audience in a minute. We want to make sure you're part of this discussion. But JT, Siobhan, and Melanie, thank you all. Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you very much. JT, give us a historic perspective on you've been leading in South Carolina. South Carolina's been a crucible of the movement. Some very important battles there against the flag, tragedy of Mother Emanuel Church. But you've been there working with leaders for many, many, many generations. Help us, give us a perspective on how you think about this moment.
Thank you very much, Mark. First of all, I bring you greetings from South Carolina. South Carolina is the home of African people who came to America.
Amen. That's it. Amen.
South Carolina is very unique, as you know. We believe that we have to have resiliency and that we must be able to do like our ancestors. We must walk by faith, not by sight. We must be able to see it, and once we see it, we must be able to claim it. And we're going to claim it by putting forth efforts, not through osmosis. You got to work. Then once you claim it, you got to achieve it. And sometimes we stop at achievement. Now we added another factor, you got to maintain it. And that's what happened throughout this country. We had a situation in South Carolina, we were one of the few states that flew the Confederate flag. And we got a call in October 1999 from someone who said to us, we need the Urban League. We need the Urban League to bring this flag down because it's a distraction. It sends a message that we are not welcome and we are second-class citizens. And I thank God that we had a board chair, Dr. David Swinton, who was the president of Benedict College, who wrote extensively in the state of Black America under Vernon Jordan. He had his doctorate from Harvard University. When it came to South Carolina, every corporate leader wanted him on the board. But he hung with the people. He said, if there's no peace, if there's no justice, there'll be no peace. That's what the president of a HBC university said. He was on our board. And he said to us, when we decided to mobilize to march in January 17, 2000, we decided to march to bring down the Confederate flag. And Dr. Swinton had a vision. Someone called me and said, Mr. McLaughlin, we only need 10,000 people to march. Dr. Swinton said, wait a minute. We ought to be able to get 60,000 people. We can get 60,000 people to a football game. Why can't we get 60,000 people to march? He had a vision. We couldn't do it by ourselves. In South Carolina, we have a collaborative effort. We work very closely with the NAACP, the Black Church, and other civic and community organizations. And we mobilized. And we were able, from December the 4th, 1999, we met at Benedict College. We brought people in from all over the state. We had to get a consensus. A lot of times, leaders want to lead, and they get so far out, the followers can't see them. We had to bring the people to the table, and we had to discuss it. And we all voted whether or not we were going to be able to put this march together from December 4th to January 17th. And that was a man who was a preacher. He stood up and said, no, we can't do this. We don't have enough time. I thank God for our young people. That was a student from Claflin University, heard about the meeting on the day of the meeting, came to Columbia, South Carolina, stood up and said, we can do it. Dr. Swinton said, call for the vote. No more discussion. And we voted that we were going to do it. And we mobilized over 50,000 people. That's what the media said, but we think we had more than that. They always unaccount what we do. So in South Carolina, first of all, we know what our ancestors did under critical situations, and we stand on their shoulders. And we're going to have the vision to know that we come together and we mobilize and we walk by faith and not by sight, we'll be successful.
Thank you. Let's give JT a hand. Siobhan, you've brought new energy to the National Council of Negro Women, standing on the shoulders of the great Dorothy Height and many others, but you've also had a special, if you will, expertise in your activism around health and healthcare issues. Our index showed some narrowing of disparities. Give us some observations on how you see things now.
Well, first of all, it is an honor to be here. My first book report was on Whitney Young Jr.
Oh, wow.
As a first grader in Camden, New Jersey. And I never told you this story. Alexis Herman is a mentor of mine and friend and of course board member of yours. And one of the things that I recall from the reading of that cartoon book was a picture of Whitney and Dorothy. And so I want to thank you for being my Whitney in this moment. Because it is somehow God does set things in order as they need to be. And so I won't preach, but I will say this about healthcare.
You preach, go ahead.
Because I do know the word, but I will say that healthcare for me has been the cornerstone of how politics has moved in this country. One of the things that we've learned about healthcare context is, and I'll give the Urban League credit for this, you were probably the first organization that really taught what it means to engage in social determinants of health. Because what social determinants of health really means is where you live, work, play, worship can affect the way that you have quality of life. And so the context for that is really connected to how healthcare can answer a lot of questions for us. The reason why I went into healthcare is because I saw my own people struggle with health. I was an athlete in college at Tulane where I met this young man named Mark Moriel. I was a collegiate student that was actually in his mayor's office as a collegiate. And one of the things that we learned and saw around us was diabetes, chronic disease. And I knew as an athlete, I had to create space for healthcare for my people. But what I didn't know that I was going to be called for a greater cause. And healthcare has really made this a greater cause. I was an NAACP health director, and one of the things that we learned was that the first death threats came to my office because of the Affordable Care Act. And why? Because closing the gap on healthcare will actually close the gap on economics, on transportation, on housing. And if you're not healthy, you cannot go to work. If you're not healthy, you cannot learn in school. If you're not healthy, you can't get out of your bed. And if your environment's not healthy, how can you live? And so the gaps that you see closing, listen, disparities are nothing but differences. Amen. I want to give you context. What's sexy now is the word is health equity. That's sexy. But what it really means is removing barriers out of the way to have quality of life in health. The problem is equity can't be achieved if the barriers are bigger than the plan.
That part.
And so the closing of those gaps, and I appreciate also the opportunity to have been a part of this report, because healthcare for me is the human rights activist plan to help us set strategy for everything else. So there's gaps being closed in chronic disease because we're learning about chronic disease. Smoking was always in our communities because it was marketed in our communities. We had foods that were deteriorating in our communities. There was a study that was done of first graders that asked what color are bananas, and they said the color was brown. And so you can't have good nutrition if you have brown bananas. So I'm saying I want a brown banana plan now. My context now is how do we create gaps to now expand and opportunities to expand inside of us advocating for equality in healthcare and removing barriers, which means healthcare providers have to be black. I said what I said. They got to be black. They've got to be women. They've got to be persons that are already living with disabilities. Healthcare cannot change if we do not have partnership with corporations. I'm fine with corporations. I'm not fine with killing the people. And so I'll close with this. If we can look at this opportunity of policy, practice, clear strategies on how we bring industry and the people in alignment, I promise you that we can push this administration and make our politics a much better place for black people in America.
Thank you, Siobhan. Excellent. Melanie, a lot of we experienced a lot of this journey together as a part of our coalition of civil rights leaders over the last decade and a half. You've spent a good part of this year really out in the states, Michigan and South Carolina and places mobilizing voters. What do you want to share from what you're hearing, what you're thinking, and then what the challenge is for 2024 to get our community fully engaged?
You said it already, we got to get in the streets, right? Our people, well, first of all, I got to step back too. You know, it is always a pleasure to be with my Urban League family, so thank you all again for inviting me. Y'all must have had, somebody was looking at us in South Carolina, because the three of us were together at Benedict College on February the 2nd, right? All right, oh, hey, with our Sarah president artists for the South Carolina primary. So, and here we are here today. That's no accident.
No accident.
Right? We are all gathered here for such a time as this.
Absolutely.
Your report is timely to give us a roadmap. Because we are not in an existential threat. We are in a fight for our very lives. And so the attacks that are taking place are not, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, people get, if you say, it's about you're not going to have the ability to make that money. You're not going to have the ability to feed your families. You're not going to have the ability to become that millionaire, billionaire, trillionaire, whatever you want to be. We got to break down. What I'm hearing is that people are dealing with, they don't see the numbers. They're not feeling the numbers. And I don't know about you, but you know, I got to feel it, right? And if I don't feel it, then I sometimes will make a determination that it's not really happening. And so with all the things that have happened, so glad you have the information about the current administration, what hasn't. And sometimes we got to also tell people that we are, my sister Latasha uses the term, we're winning. If we wasn't winning, they wouldn't be going after us, right? If we wasn't winning young people, they wouldn't be trying to shut us down. Nobody wastes time on anybody. If they are, you know, so we're winning. Now, you know, I'm from Florida, by way of Mims, Florida. And I always gonna lift up my hometown. And so when I go back home, you know, our folks aren't, it's not getting all the way down to everybody. Unemployment is still high in my hometown of Mims, Florida.
Come on.
Destination place vacation, just make sure you stop through if you're on 95 or US 1. Right? They're not seeing that. What they're seeing in Florida, which is why we spent in October, Mark, you know, we launched, and thank you, Urban League, you were one of the ones who gave me a check when I was like, okay, I got this idea, I ain't got no money, but I'm going. I do these things sometimes, right? God said, go. I went. I went down there with no money for 30 days, but money came. And Urban League was one of the ones who came. And Mark believed, because we have to get down to knocking on those doors and communicating with our people, or they're not going to show up. Okay? And so we spent that 30 days, and what we kept hearing was, you know, I'm still struggling. I can't afford, you know, to get the child care. I can't afford eggs. If I heard one more person talking to me about the cost of eggs, have you seen the cost of eggs? Right? It's a real thing. So if I don't feel it, I'm not going to connect it to what you have here. So if we don't get into the community and knock on those doors, that old-fashioned way, we can do all this all day long. And I got two of them, one over there. We'll go one for a minute. We have to get in community in a real way, and we cannot wait. We have to do it now. Urban League, I remember when Mark and I hooked up. He was supposed to be the Alpha president. You decided to be the Urban League president, right? Am I lying? You know I'm not lying, right? Okay. This is my brother from another mother. Am I lying?
You're right. Yeah. That's for sure.
We were at Harvard. I know I got shut up, but we were at Harvard University. I was doing a fellowship And he was doing his fellowship. You had just finished being the mayor. You know, you'll be the mayor for life, whether you got a position or not. And we had that conversation, but we also had the conversation about how we have to work together and how we have to organize together, how we have to unify. Is that Dr. Daniels? Hey, Dr. Daniels, you know what I'm talking about. So that reality is that we have to come together now. We have to do it now. When y'all go back home, Urban League, people respect you all to bring the information. But I also remember the Urban League would get in the streets, right? You in the suites and the streets, right. And we need you in both.
Let's give him a big round of applause. So we got a few minutes. So I'm going to call on Dr. Ron Daniels, who is the founder of the Institute of the Black World, for a question. And then I'm going to call on William Barnes. Where are you, William? You were just there. You were in my eyesight. The president of the Advisory Council of Executives, for a question. And then I'm going to call on you, Jennifer Tompkins, for a question. So I got all, now these are questions, no sermons, no sermonettes. If you want to make a brief statement and say, what do you think? That's cool, but we only have about 8 to 10 minutes. Ron, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a friend, ally, and mentor to so many of us. Ron Daniels.
One thing about being an elder, though, you can always change the proposition.
Mike.
So I really don't have a question. I have a commendation.
Okay.
Because I'm also a professor and a whole bunch of other things.
We have a mic. Do we have a mic for, do we have an extra mic? Yeah, let's just hand this mic down. Yeah, thank you.
It's also great because I'm trying to beat that lady right there. I came to town to meet you. No, I really just want to not have a question, but a commendation, really. Because it is so important, as Bob Marley said, that we know our history. And the way in which this was laid out, a discussion of construction, post-Reconstruction. We are at a moment, in terms of doing our civic engagement, Dr. Ramona Eaton used to say, we need a cultural offensive. I'm about to write about that again, because we need to know the history. Latondra Brown, she's brilliant because she knows what happened with those Reconstruction amendments. We all need to know that. So I don't have a question. I got the challenge. Let's go to work. Also agree. It can't just be the virtual. We have to connect the virtual with what we always did. It's a synthesis. It's not an either or that we have to do. But commendations on the history.
Thank you. We're going to take the mic. William Barnes, president of the Advisory Council of Executives. William, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Let me say this, Mark. Thank you for your leadership. I've got to start with 20 years. We continue to talk about this and the connectivity. When I think about every time he stands before us, the connectivity with other leaders in the community, we talk about coalitions. So I wanted to make that as a statement first and foremost. Here's the question. I had a conversation and had dinner with some of my colleagues yesterday, and we were talking about how we continue to mobilize and more particularly keep folks engaged. Right? When we talk about engagement, we know, and you've got the report out as it relates to President Joe Biden, that does not seem to be translating into the community as it relates to, do we have the right things happening as it comes out of DC? So the question is how do we overcome the challenges? And they are real, make no mistake. When we think about young people, they don't see organization, right? They don't see that organization is the way to go when we're talking about it. So we have a fight on our hands. We can't win it without our young people. I'm very interested to hear, what are we thinking about? What is the think tank? How are we going to make sure that we are connecting with the generation to be sure they can help us and support us in this fight?
Siobhan, you want to go first?
I want it.
Yeah,
I want it.
Okay.
Yeah, I want that one. Two things. The inside joke in my office is they call me number 45 because I'm 45 years old. And that is an anomaly in our space. And what I've told them is that you can call me 45, but you better start calling me 25 seeker. Because 25 seekers are the ones that young people have literally checked out on the way that we do institutionalism. So unless you grew up in a legacy space where you understand institutions, you have to then change your hat. I am blessed to be in the lineage of folks that looked at black institutionalism as a part of strategy. That is no longer the case. And quite frankly, if we're honest about it, we have left our folks to create their own institutionalism because we have failed them. So I say there's two things. One, vote values. If we hide behind Israel and Palestine, if we don't talk about the realities of the ground, then we are just as complicit as the administration that we are actually criticizing. So we gotta tell our truth. I can tell you that young people are actually open when you have the conversation, but we have not created space for them to have a conversation. So it's not just virtual streets, but it's also going to where they actually go. And there's a massive assumption that people are not engaged. Young people actually are engaged. They're just not as tolerant as some of us are. So we work on our tolerance approach. Like, we can learn something. Like, they wish we would say something. They would never take some of the stuff that our ancestors took. And we mad at them, but we taught them. We should be grateful for what their obstinance says. It says we gave them power. So what I'm saying to you is there is an opportunity. Don't just be urban leaguers. Put on your jeans. Put your hat on backwards. Go back and say something. Put your red bottoms on too. I'm fine with it. But give them an opportunity to sit at the table with you. The only reason why we're winning is because we got young people at all of our tables.
Thank you. Great response. And we have just one last question. I'm sorry. We have to wrap. We're going to go to Jen Tompkins from Wilmington. Go ahead, Jen.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for this opportunity to ask this question. I'm a preacher as well, and a lot of times when I tell young people about voting, I say one thing we should do it like communion, in remembrance of, if we don't do it any other way. But for everyone in the room who's going back to our several communities, want to know, do you have any talking points to compel our younger voters to recognize the importance of voting? Do you have any talking points?
I got two. I would say yes. One, you have them right here, I believe. I believe what Mark laid out is a core, clear message, right? The 3 Ds. So I think that's very clear. And you break that down. What we have in our organization, Mark's a board chair now as well, we have what we call power to ballot, right? And we break that down and connect it. We went on we were in Florida, we went to FAMU, we went to Bethune, all of the HBCUs, but also in the broader community, right? And so what young people got was they could connect that dot. We have to connect those dots, but make it simple, something they can grab. Our tagline is, we will not be erased. Let me tell you something. Young people walking up to us, I'm in the airport. We got a shirt that says, power to ballot. We will not be erased. It has no organization name on it. It has no affiliation. We got on the back now, don't get me wrong. We got a brand. Somebody paid for this stuff. Real talk. But that simple message, power to ballot, we will not be erased. We're shocked. We're going to put it on, and Mark's learned, I learned from the Urban League, you can make some money off some t-shirts and some sweatshirts so you can pay for the movement. That's what we're doing. And so make it simple and sharp and let people run with it. They can get that. But if you do the whole, they're not going to listen. Okay.
Mark,
So
I want to inject something. I can't.
Yeah, one minute there, JT, because I'm being told we got to wrap.
You got it.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We just recognized 1,500 kids. We do it every year for the past 30 years. We let them know achievement matters. Young people don't want you to talk, they want to see you in action. And that's what we got to do. We got to continue to connect with our young people. They are our future. Power to young people.
So I think some of our college students have joined us.
Yes.
Some of our BEEP students have joined us from Howard, Morgan State. Are you all in the room? Please stand. Let's recognize them. Please stand. Please stand. Please stand. So I'll close with this observation, and that is, I think there's something simple when we talk about young people. One thing we must all remember is we were once. Don't you get amnesia? There's something simple, it's called listening. Hearing and asking. I was accused of being disruptive, troublemaker. You know, I was running for office as a young person. They said, boy, go sit down. I said, no, I'm not going to sit down, right? And I forged ahead. And youth does not necessarily equate with immaturity.
That's right.
And young people are taking on the responsibility to manage their lives, build a family, build a career. Many young people have responsibilities to take care of others in the family. And so we want to, I think sometimes we want to listen a little bit. Even if we're going to engage, as opposed to treating it as though we have all the answers. It's the line in Glory. This common's got a great line. We need the wisdom of the elders and young people's energy. And I drop the mic and we stand adjourned. Thank you all. And we're going to transition to Rhonda Spears Bell. Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you so much. Let's give another round of applause to this dynamic panel. I'd also like to thank our State of Black America launch event presenting sponsor, Venture Global. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of the live stream portion of this program. But before we sign off, I want to say thank you to our online audience that today's discussion has positioned us in a place of strength and possibility. A generation of giants and justice warriors are responsible for the development and passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and we won't fail them. We will honor their legacy by preserving and expanding their achievement for generations to come. So thank you once again for being a part of the change. Now, for those of you in the room, now that the live stream is ending, for those of you who are in the room, there's a lot more ahead for our in-person attendees. And I want to welcome to the stage now Tara Murray, who will share a brief overview